They said only the most dangerous species were invited. The Deathworld Summit, an unspoken tradition among apex civilizations, existed outside law and diplomacy. No translators, no mediators, no survivors if things went wrong. It wasn't peace they sought, it was dominance, and invitations were issued only to those too dangerous to ignore or too foolish to refuse. Humanity received their sealed and bioreactive alloy, etched in a dead language no longer spoken aloud. The message was simple: come prove you belong, or be forgotten. The humans sent for. No pomp, no ceremony. Not a politician among them. They were soldiers, scientists, survivors. And unlike the others, they weren't born into a death world. They made one out of their own. Earth wasn't just dangerous. It was creative in how it killed. Humanity had learned to evolve faster than the threats that hunted them, and they hadn't stopped. The moment they arrived, the room changed. 16 species were already present, each believing they were at the top of the galactic food chain. They saw the humans not as guests, but as prey with delusions of grandeur. They couldn't smell pheromones. They didn't exude thermal threats. They didn't speak in voltage or radiate raw kinetic energy. To the summit, they were boring, disappointingly normal. But then the humans didn't flinch. When the Draxery delegate extended a limb laced with neurotoxic fibers, standard intimidation ritual, the lead human simply stared. No blink, no reaction, just a cool, steady gaze, like measuring the length of the danger and already estimating how long it would take to neutralize. The silence that followed wasn't due to respect. It was confusion, miscalculation. They had expected fear, or at least recognition status. They got analysis, and that quietly disturbed them more than any primal scream. The summit's first ritual began with a gift. Each species had contributed one artifact, something harmless to its owner, but potentially lethal to others. A test cloaked in diplomacy. When the human's turn came, a large cube was presented, its surface smooth and colorless. The Etrin who delivered it called it the map of all motion. Moments after activation, pulses of high-frequency vibration passed through the room. The cube emitted a subtle hum, inaudible to most, but disorienting to several present. Some shifted uncomfortably. A few winced. One delegate passed out. The humans stood still, blinking as the surface of the cube projected a six-dimensional kinetic map. Beautiful, complex, and designed to overload biological minds. The human scientist tilted her head. Her lips moved without sound, counting. She reached into her pouch, pulled out a small lens, clipped it to her left eye, and resumed watching. The others did the same. Not one of them looked away. Not one fell. The Etrin narrowed its gaze. You see it? The human nodded. We understand it. And they did, because understanding complexity was how they survived chaos. The map wasn't dangerous. It was a challenge, a conversation in motion, and to the humans, it was a first draft. Later, the Shokren delegate offered a sip of their traditional toxin, harmless to them, fatal to all others, corrosive enough to eat through armor plating. The human in question took it, sniffed it, and casually set it down. Give me the real one, he said. What you hold is a diluted version. The real one's behind your secondary gland. You're trying to test resistance, not manners. The Shokren's eyes widened. It was true. He had been watching for a flinch, a hesitation, even a subtle twist of disgust. Instead, he was read like a schematic. The humans weren't responding to threats. They were diagnosing them, categorizing weaknesses, already building profiles. The summit's third ritual involved public discourse. Each delegate made a statement, a declaration of power or heritage. Most delivered ancient stories of conquest. The room filled with tales of acid winds, molten moons, bone kingdoms carved from extinct species. Each tale more grotesque than the last. When the humans' turn arrived, the room leaned in. This was their chance to fail. They had no empires, no species enslaved, no star burned in their name. And yet, the human leader spoke just 4 words. We made ourselves dangerous. No expansion, no metaphor, no boast, just fact. The silence that followed was louder than any speech given, because the delegates realized something vital. Every species present had become powerful by conquering others. The humans had done it by conquering themselves. Later, in private quarters, murmurs spread. Some questioned whether the humans had prepared for the summit specifically. Others whispered of Earth's rumored war-ravaged past, its cycles of extinction and rebirth. Some dismissed them still, claiming theatrics and bravado, but the seeds of doubt were sown. Delegates began consulting one another, double-checking protocols. Several attempted to scan the humans discreetly. None succeeded. Their tech was bafflingly opaque, wrapped in countermeasures that adapted with each attempt. One delegate remarked it was like trying to skin a shadow that refused to stay still. And yet the humans remained cordial, quiet, observing, waiting. That was what disturbed them most. Every species present had something to prove. The humans had nothing to prove, and that was a problem, because power without display wasn't confidence. It was certainty, the kind that came from surviving the kind of horrors you don't write into songs or etch into banners. By the end of the first cycle, one thing was clear. Humanity wasn't intimidated, impressed, or concerned. They were watching, listening, measuring everything. And that's when the summit realized they had made a mistake. They had invited predators. But they had welcomed something far worse. A species that didn't posture, because they didn't need to. The morning began with the first true test. A Draxery official announced it casually, as though it were just another ceremonial engagement. The words dripped with smugness. A trial of instinct. A demonstration of reaction and resolve. In truth, it was a trap, a spectacle for humiliation. The arena, deep below the summit chamber, was carved from living stone and rigged with volatile terrain. The challenge? Survive the shifting gravity fields and acid vapor cycles while reaching the central monolith. No tools, no backup, no hints. The audience of delegates gathered behind observation barriers, prepared to witness human failure up close. For competitors stepped forward, one from the Rinth, one from the Velkar, one from the Cyril Dominion, and a human envoy, Colonel Maravane. When the trial began, the arena shifted violently. Gravity fractured. Down became sideways. Platform spun, broke, reformed. The mist rolled in, slow at first, then faster, seeping through the cracks and crawling up metal limbs. The Rinth stumbled within seconds, their six-legged stride thrown into chaos. The Velkar adapted briefly, but one misstep, and their chitin snapped on impact. Cyril, masters of electromagnetic fields, hovered for a moment, until the polarity inverted. Mara walked, not ran, not leapt, walked, slow, steady, controlled. Her boots shimmered faintly, subtly adjusting grip. The soles flexed and locked in millisecond intervals. Each movement was calculated, each breath measured. She didn't react. She preempted. By the time she reached the monolith, the others were either incapacitated or unconscious. A low murmur rippled through the observation deck. Some assumed luck. Others called it adaptation. But the more experienced delegates saw it clearly. She had trained for unpredictable death zones. Because that was the difference between humans and the rest. The others had evolved on dangerous worlds. Humans had trained themselves to conquer any. The next trial was less physical, more insidious. A chamber sealed with psionic emitters, originally designed to test unity of mind. It generated low-frequency pulses and emotional distortions, targeting subconscious fears. Most species use this as a form of meditation, reflection, or mild interrogation. But to outsiders, it was pure disorientation. The chosen human was a cognitive specialist named Idris Wren. He stepped into the chamber, calm, with nothing but a small pouch clipped to his side. The doors closed. The observers leaned forward, waiting. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Most delegates lasted 3. Inside, the walls shifted, cycling through auditory hallucinations and phantom visuals. A lesser mind would have succumbed to sensory flooding or dissociation. But Idris stood unmoved. What the summit didn't know was that humanity had discovered psionic interference long before contact. Through war, through biotech failures, and through their own brief, disastrous experiments with neural link systems. Idris wasn't unarmed. He wore an adaptive headset tuned to intercept and balance cognitive interference. Lightweight, seamless, and impossible to detect from the outside. More importantly, he had endured worse. Real trauma, real madness, manufactured torment on battlefields the galaxy didn't know existed. When the doors reopened, he stepped out and said only one thing. Too clean to be real fear. No brag, just observation. And yet it unsettled more than any scream could have. After that, the summit began recalibrating their assumptions. The humans weren't just surviving. They were excelling in systems specifically designed to dismantle foreign biology and cognition. So the summit changed tactics. A diplomatic game. Words. Subtlety. Psychological fencing. It was called a language spiral, an old rite where delegates exchanged core truths through layered metaphor, tone, and subharmonic intention. It was supposed to destabilize non-native speakers and expose internal inconsistencies. The human linguist, Dr. Cal Reyes, stepped forward, not with a translator but with a handheld neural tap, a device that didn't just listen to words but mapped the emotional cadence behind them. As the spiral began, he didn't speak first. He listened. For 7 rounds, the spiral circled, metaphor within metaphor, threats hidden in riddles, boasts woven into silence. Each delegate probe shifted, escalated. Then Rhea spoke, not in any one language, but in all of them, stitched together like a tapestry of logic and tone. His words moved like precision strikes. Every phrase answered 3 previous metaphors at once. Every statement carried meaning in syntax, rhythm, and implication. The final phrase, when translated, read simply, "We knew this game before we knew the stars." A pause. No rebuttal. The spiral ended. For the first time in recorded summit history, a delegate was not just acknowledged, but bowed to. Even the Ferak, who had not bowed in 1,000 rotations, inclined their crest. Not all took it well. That night, 2 species tried to corner the human contingent in the corridor, an unspoken punishment for outperforming expectations. A show of strength disguised as a misunderstanding. They never made contact. The corridor lights blinked once, then twice. By the time security drones arrived, both would-be attackers were unconscious, bound, and stacked neatly against the wall. Their neural inhibitors had been short-circuited, their limbs disabled, not broken. The humans hadn't killed them. They'd sent a message. This wasn't revenge. It was restraint. Control, surgical. Mercy delivered with clarity. Afterward, whispers filled the summit halls. Some delegates started avoiding the humans. Others approached cautiously, trying to understand them. One asked what kind of planet required such readiness. The answer was simple. It's not the planet. It's the history. They had survived themselves. Evolved through civil wars, extinctions, diseases, environmental collapse, and still emerged standing. No single threat defined them, because all of them had, by the end of the second cycle, one truth had begun to crystallize silently, without announcement. The humans were not dangerous because of their strength. They were dangerous because they never waited to be told how to survive. The third cycle of the summit shifted focus from tests of strength and intellect to philosophy and intent, what the summit called the core alignment. It wasn't just about who could survive. It was about who should lead. The assumption was simple. The most dangerous species would be the most destructive, and the most destructive should be contained. The humans didn't fit into that mold, and that made them the biggest threat of all. This phase involved a ritual exchange of ideology, a symbolic offering of values. Every species submitted a core doctrine, a small digital artifact containing their guiding principle. Some submitted religious creeds, others war codes. A few offered untranslatable emotional wavelengths that defied logic but conveyed purpose. The humans submitted a single line encoded in layered logic syntax. We adapt because we must, we endure because we choose, and we protect because we remember. The phrase was parsed, dissected, and debated. Delegates argued over the meaning of remember. Did it imply vengeance? Regret? History? The humans refused to explain it. Let them guess. Because in the pause that followed, the delegates realized what that sentence truly meant. It was a survival ethos, but not a selfish one. It didn't seek conquest or legacy. It was rooted in memory, in loss, in responsibility carried forward. They weren't predators seeking dominance. They were guardians shaped by consequence. Still, some didn't accept this ambiguity. The Vralin envoy, famed for its species' singular rule, only supremacy guarantees safety, challenged the humans publicly. In a chamber pulsing with intensity, it demanded to know what gave humans a right to attend a summit for Deathworlders when they came from a planet of barely Tier 2 status. The human envoy, Lieutenant Hale, responded not with threat or explanation, but with a simple question. Do you think survival is a privilege or a burden? The Vralin hesitated, not because the question was complex, but because it had never occurred to them to ask it. The next moment shifted everything. A delegation from the Zarkelf arrived unannounced. They had declined to attend at first, known for their reclusive, hive-like mentality and their disdain for lesser species. No one had expected them to show up, and yet they did, because they had intercepted fragments of human communication, snippets of Earth's past conflicts, the Battle of Lagos, the reconstruction of Europa, the Carbon Wars. They had assumed exaggeration, but now, observing the humans firsthand, they recognized a pattern only another hive species could detect. Collective trauma molded into cooperative survival. The Zarkelf did not speak in words. They released chemical markers and electromagnetic bursts that carried emotion and analysis. It was pure, raw assessment. The data they broadcasted in that moment stunned the chamber. Probability of human strategic dominance within 400 cycles, 87.3%. Probability of human-led alliance formation across galactic fragments, 92.8%. Probability of voluntary planetary submission to human leadership, unknown, risk undefined. They didn't mean it as a threat. It was simply fact, an emergent trend. For a moment, every other delegate became quiet, not out of fear, but from realization. The humans didn't need the summit's approval. They were already on a path that didn't require it. One delegate from the Ulthari tried to reassert dominance. They'd ruled over 3 minor sectors, broken 2 rebellions, and evolved in radioactive deserts. They stood and asked the humans directly, "If you're not here to intimidate and not here to conquer, then why did you come?" The human response came quietly, "To learn what we'll be dealing with." The implications were clear. They weren't posturing. They were preparing. Because humans didn't assume they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They assumed they weren't, and they were already building models to deal with the ones who might be. After that, alliances shifted. Several minor species, previously aligned under dominant delegates like the Draxri and the Ulthari, began approaching the humans in private. Quiet questions, offers of trade, requests for cultural data. They weren't abandoning their patrons. They were hedging bets. The humans didn't gloat. They just shared fragments, carefully selected. A file about cooperative farming in climate collapse zones. A schematic for mobile water purification tech. A psychological de-escalation algorithm designed for multilateral conflict zones. Nothing offensive, nothing lethal. Yet each one carried the same message. We solve problems no one else is willing to. Some of the larger factions became uncomfortable. This wasn't how power was supposed to spread. Not through diplomacy, not through kindness. It threatened the very fabric of the summit's silent hierarchy. So they tried isolation. One by one, key interactions were blocked, meetings canceled, shared data rescinded. Even the summit's food offerings were modified to trigger mild human allergies. The humans adapted instantly, brought their own rations, resumed operations without protest, and in private, they logged everything. Because humans weren't just adaptable, they were pattern-driven. They cataloged every slight, every maneuver, not for retaliation, for preparation. By the end of the 3rd cycle, the humans had accomplished something no species at the summit had done before. They hadn't just survived or impressed. They reframed the question entirely. The summit had always asked, who is most dangerous? But now they asked, what happens when the dangerous ones choose discipline instead of domination? That was what disturbed them most. The humans hadn't just proven they belonged. They'd made everyone else question if they did. The final phase wasn't official. No announcements, no ceremonial summons, just an urgent, silent message passed through unseen channels. One species at a time. A new species had arrived at the edge of summit space. Not by invitation, not by diplomacy, but by breach. The Norgathy, unmapped, unregistered, unspoken even in myth. They hadn't sent emissaries. They hadn't requested a seat. They had simply disabled one of the summit's outer perimeter satellites and sent a transmission composed of quantum-locked threat matrices. No demands, just an encrypted declaration of observation. Most delegates panicked. Quietly, internally, the summit had existed for centuries without serious external disruption. It was supposed to be a meeting of titans, a gathering of apex predators and planetary survivors. No outsider had ever dared challenge its boundary. Until now, a closed-door emergency meeting was called, not in the great chambers, but in the deep war rooms beneath the structure's foundation. Only core species were allowed. The humans weren't invited, so they found another way in, not through force. Through access logs, ventilation systems, and signal traces left in unsecured memory banks. In less than an hour, the human team had a full simulation of the emergency summit on their systems. They listened, watched, analyzed. The other species were scared, not of the Norgathy's arrival, but of what it implied. A predator strong enough to bypass summit defenses without being seen was one thing. But a predator that didn't want to talk? That was something else. The humans weren't alarmed. They were curious, because this wasn't new. Human history was a litany of first contacts gone wrong. The stories varied: disease, war, betrayal. But the constant was clear. Unknown entities always acted without clear intent, and the greatest threat wasn't violence. It was silence. So while the summit scrambled to reinforce its border, deploy surveillance drones, and ready countermeasures, the humans sensed something else. A story. They broadcasted a shortwave signal across the same quantum-locked frequency the Norgathy had used. No encryption, no weapons, just a recording. An ancient Earth tale of a lone predator facing extinction. Choose an ally with his former prey in order to survive a greater storm. They didn't say it was about humanity. They didn't say it was about the Norgathy. They just told it, and waited. The Norgathy responded. 3 hours later, a single phrase came through. Understood. The signal vanished. No attack followed. No proximity breach. Just silence. This time, voluntary. The summit didn't know how to process what had just happened. Delegates accused the humans of recklessness, of provoking something far beyond their comprehension. The humans didn't answer the accusations. They didn't need to, because one by one, the summit systems confirmed it. The Norgathy had left summit space entirely, but not before pinging only one species on their way out: humans. That was when the shift became undeniable. It wasn't that humans were the most violent. They weren't the strongest or the oldest, but they were something else entirely, an unknown quantity that could read the unpredictable and respond not with fear, but with understanding. Adaptation wasn't just a strength. It was a philosophy. In the final council of the summit, the High Arbiter of the Draxery addressed the humans directly. No pretense. No metaphors. We once believed only Deathworlders could survive the worst the galaxy offers. But perhaps the worst isn't violence. Perhaps it's uncertainty. Chaos. Collapse. And if so, then maybe you're not here because you survived a Deathworld. Maybe you're here because you were forged by one. The humans nodded. No speeches. No self-congratulation. The summit officially added humanity to its core member list by unanimous vote. No objections. But by then it didn't matter, because everyone had seen the truth. Humanity didn't need the summit. The summit needed humanity. After the vote, a private delegate from the Cyworld asked the human commander a final question, one not meant for records. What do you fear? The answer came after a pause. Entropy. Not the physical kind, the cultural kind. When a species forgets why it started surviving in the first place. That was humanity's real weapon. Not force, not brilliance. Memory. They remembered everything. The wars that almost ended them. The treaties that barely held. The times they were the monsters. The times they were the only ones who stood against monsters. And more importantly, the cost of every choice. As the summit dissolved and each delegate returned to their sector, something unspoken traveled with them. Not fear, not awe, something more dangerous. Respect, because humans had proven they could pass every test. But the real terror was that they hadn't been trying to impress anyone. They were just getting started.